Don't come home for Thanksgiving. Emily already invited her friends. And you'll only embarrass the family. That was the message I got from my mother on a cold Monday morning, 3 days before my flight back to Connecticut. I read it once, then twice, and my hands started shaking, not with anger, but with a strange, cold clarity. There it was, spelled out as plainly as ever. I wasn't welcome in the very house I'd helped pay for. The house where my name had never been on the deed, but always on every bill. In that moment, I realized this was never just about holidays or family drama. It was about being disposable. For context, let me tell you the financial stakes up front, because they matter here. Over the past 8 years, I had sent nearly $200,000 to my family mortgage payments, medical bills, college tuition for my younger sister Emily, even a down payment on my parents' new SUV. You would think all that would buy me a place at the table for Thanksgiving dinner. But in my family, silence was currency, and love was transactional. I replied to my mother's message with only one word: understood. Then, in less than 48 hours, I did what I should have done years ago. I logged into every account: bank, mortgage, credit card. I shut down the automatic transfers. I emailed the mortgage lender, alerting them to suspected financial abuse and formally withdrawing my support. I flagged suspicious loan documents to the fraud department. The total sum at stake close to $200,000. Within 2 days, chows erupted. My phone lit up with calls from my father, my mother, Emily, even their lawyer. There were voicemails full of threats and pleas, but not a single word of apology. That was the first time I realized the true value of walking away control. I know what you're thinking: this is all too much, too fast. Who turns off the financial tap on their own family right before the holidays? But you have to understand, this wasn't a decision made in anger or spite. It was a quiet calculation, years in the making. And what they didn't know was, I'd been documenting everything. Every transfer, every bill, every text message, every phone call. Not just for protection, but for the day I would finally need to prove, beyond all doubt, who was actually keeping this family afloat. You see, when the money stopped, so did the pretense. Suddenly, my absence was a crisis. My silence was an act of war. But they still had no idea what was coming next. Here's the part I haven't told you yet. I didn't just walk away and disappear. I made sure the right people found out exactly why. And the number I mentioned earlier, close to $200,000, is not just a number. It's evidence. Before I share the aftermath, let me take you back to where it all began. Because to understand why I did what I did, you need to know who I am, and how a family can train you for war without ever lifting a finger. But first, let me leave you with this when you finally decide to stop being the silent benefactor. Sometimes you lose a family. Sometimes you gain your freedom. I'll tell you how it happened. But what they didn't realize was, I had prepared for this day long before I ever got that message. My name is Olivia Bennett. I am 33 years old, a litigation attorney in New York City. And, at least according to every family group text, the responsible one. If you looked at my resume, you'd say Harvard Law, a string of hard-won scholarships, and a reputation for taking the toughest cases. What you wouldn't see are the years I spent moonlighting as my family's private bank therapist and crisis management hotline, all while trying to convince myself I mattered to them for more than just my reliability. I grew up in a classic, tree-lined suburb in Connecticut. A place where appearances meant everything, and what happened behind closed doors was nobody else's business. My father, Richard Bennett, once ran a mid-sized business until a failed investment left him scrambling for work and chasing his pride. My mother, Susan, lived for church committees and bake sales, always smiling on the outside, always quietly judging on the inside. Then there was Emily, my younger sister by 4 years, the golden child, whose Instagram perfect life and wide-eyed charm made her the center of attention everywhere but in a crisis. If I sound bitter, it's not because of the money. Honestly, I never cared much for it. What really stings is how the more I gave, the less I was seen. Growing up, I was the quiet achiever, while Emily was winning pageants and throwing birthday parties fit for reality television. I was at the kitchen table, balancing equations and filling out college applications by myself. When I got into Harvard Law, nobody visited the campus with me. When I passed the bar exam, my parents sent me a text. Good job. Live. No calls. No celebration. When Emily got a new car, there was a party and a prayer circle. By the time I was 21, I was working 3 jobs to pay for my education and still sending money home every month, covering Emily's school trips and Dad's credit card bills. At first, I told myself this was just what families do. That's what my mother always said. Anyway, family means showing up, even when it's hard. But as the years went by, the requests became demands. The thanks became silence. Eventually, silence became expectation. There were moments of real resentment. And yes, moments I almost cut them off. But every time I tried to step back, someone would get sick. Or Emily would have an emergency. Or Mom would call with tears in her voice, asking if I could just help one more time. I started keeping records of everything, not out of paranoia. But survival. I tracked every transfer, every check, every favor. I kept folders of texts and emails. At first, it was just to make sure I didn't forget. Later, it was because I started to realize I needed proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't just imagining being used. You might wonder why I didn't lean on anyone. The truth is, I had Sarah, my best friend since law school, now my colleague and, frankly, the only person who's ever truly understood. Sarah saw through the perfect Bennett family image long before I did. She was there for the breakdowns after phone calls home, for the nights when I stared at my bank statement in disbelief, for the quiet moments when I admitted I didn't even feel like I had a family anymore. If you've ever been the responsible one, you know the drill. You fix things. You hold everyone else together. And when things go wrong, somehow, it's always your fault. That was my story. Until the day a single text message gave me permission to stop. I remember sitting in my office that morning, reading the message from my mother over and over. I looked at my reflection in the window and thought, if you don't stand up for yourself now, you never will. For the first time in my life, I decided to treat my own boundaries as if they were worth defending. Before we get to how everything unraveled, I need to show you why it was inevitable. Because being born into a family doesn't mean you belong there. Not really. Sometimes, it just means you're the most convenient one to blame when things fall apart. But I'll get to that soon. What matters next is how my childhood shaped every decision I made, and why. For me, betrayal never started with money. It's strange what sticks with you from childhood, the details you cling to, because somehow they explain everything later. For me, it wasn't the birthday parties I didn't get or the hand-me-down clothes. It was the look on my mother's face every time Emily won a medal. And the silence when I brought home straight A's. In the Bennett family, love was measured by how loudly you celebrated the golden child. The rest of us, well, we were background noise. I was 8 when Emily was born, and I became the helper overnight. I learned to heat bottles, tie shoelaces, and quietly step aside when guests arrived. By the time I was 10, I was babysitting Emily after school so Mom could volunteer at the church or go to her book club. My father started leaning on me too, asking me to balance the checkbook, help him write job applications, listen to him vent about how hard things were. No one ever asked if it was too much. In my family, needing less meant you deserved less. I remember one birthday, my 16th. I'd been saving up for months, hoping for my own celebration. Maybe even a cake. Instead, Mom told me that Emily's dance recital was the same night. You understand, right? Liv, she said, her voice gentle but final. Emily's so nervous. She needs us. So I sat in the audience and cheered louder than anyone while my birthday slipped quietly by. Those patterns didn't change as we got older. When Emily crashed her first car, I loaned her money to cover repairs. When Dad lost his job for the 3rd time, I used my summer internship money to pay the utility bills. No one ever called it help, it was just assumed I'd make it work. That's what good daughters did. When I left for college, things got worse. Distance made it easier for my family to pretend I was just a line on the budget, not a person. Every time I got a scholarship or a work-study job, Mom would sigh with relief and say, "That's one less thing we have to worry about." When I got into Harvard Law, there was a card in the mail, signed Love, Mom and Dad. No call, no visit. But when Emily got accepted to her 3rd choice university, there was a full-blown dinner party and a week of Instagram posts. I won't pretend I was always graceful about it. There were fights, some loud, most quiet. My mother would say I was too sensitive. My father would call me dramatic. Emily, she was oblivious, breezing through life on a cushion of other people's sacrifices. Looking back, I see how my parents let her believe she was the center of gravity, and how they let me believe it was my job to keep everyone else from floating away. Sarah, my best friend since Harvard, was the only one who saw through it. She used to joke that I was the emergency fund and emotional support hotline all rolled into one. She was the one who sat with me during finals week, watching me transfer money to my family while my own rent was overdue. She saw me cry more times than my mother ever did. The hardest part wasn't the money, it was realizing, year by year, that nothing I did would ever be enough. That my value was measured in what I could provide, not who I was. I kept telling myself that if I worked harder, made more, became more impressive, maybe they'd finally see me. Spoiler, they didn't. But every story has a breaking point. Mine came not with a bang, but with a whisper, a single message. A familiar plea for help that didn't even try to sound grateful. I remember standing in my cramped Manhattan apartment, staring at my phone, realizing that the only person who could change this was me. Of course, change didn't happen overnight. There were still years of back and forth, moments of hope and disappointment, cycles of giving in and pulling back. But slowly, I began to keep records, screenshots, email threads, bank statements. I started writing down every time I was called too much or not enough. I began to understand that documenting the past was the first step toward protecting my future. If you're wondering why someone would keep giving for so long, it's simple. When you grow up as the responsible one, you learn to mistake sacrifice for love. And you learn, the hard way, that not everyone who calls themselves family deserves a seat at your table. That realization that my boundaries mattered didn't make me immune to betrayal. In fact, it set the stage for the worst betrayals of all. The ones that would put my career, my finances, and my sanity on the line. But I'll get to that soon. The next part of my story isn't about the past. It's about how betrayal, once it takes root, never stops growing. And how, in my case, it was about to reach a breaking point that no amount of forgiveness could repair. If you've ever felt the ground shift beneath your feet suddenly, realizing you've been standing on quicksand for years, that's what the next chapter of my life felt like. After college, I moved to New York City, passed the bar exam, and started working long hours at a law firm. But the real work, that was still happening behind the scenes. As I tried to hold together a family that didn't even bother to pretend they were holding me. It started, as these things often do, with a crisis. 2 years ago, Emily called in tears. Her small business, a boutique she'd opened with zero experience and a mountain of borrowed money, was failing. She needed help. She always did. Only this time, it wasn't a couple $100s. She needed someone to co-sign a business loan for $80,000. Our parents had already said no, but not before suggesting, "Olivia, you're the lawyer in the family. You have the resources. This is what family is for." I hesitated. I told myself, this time, you'll say no. But then Mom called, crying, saying, if Emily loses everything, it'll break her spirit. Please, Olivia, just this once. Dad said it was my responsibility as the eldest. The guilt worked its magic. I signed the paperwork. Emily's business limped along for another year, racking up more debt. Before folding, the bank came after me for the remaining balance. And Emily, who had promised to pay me back every cent, disappeared for a while. The $80,000, I wrote it off as a lesson. But that was just the beginning. Over the years, I'd been making regular payments on the family mortgage, about $1,800 each month. For nearly 6 years. That's over $100,000. On top of that, I paid hospital bills for my father's surgeries. Nearly $30,000 in total. And I covered Emily's graduate school tuition, another $45,000. Every time, I told myself, this is the last time. Every time, I was wrong. And then came the real betrayal. One day, while applying for a home loan of my own, the bank flagged several outstanding debts tied to my name. Loans I had never taken. Credit cards I'd never used. Even a second mortgage on the family house. I confronted my parents. My father claimed ignorance. My mother played innocent. Emily just said, it's not that big a deal. Liv. Everyone borrows against family sometimes. But it was a big deal. I was liable for more than $60,000 in additional debt I had never authorized. My credit score tanked. My plans to buy a small apartment of my own evaporated overnight. For the first time, I felt truly alone. When I tried to talk to my parents about it, they told me I was overreacting. When I called Emily, She blocked my number. It didn't end there. Word got out at work. Someone, a family friend, let it slip to one of the partners that I was having serious financial trouble. Suddenly, my caseload shrank. People whispered in the break room. My reputation, something I'd built with blood, sweat, and years of sleepless nights, started to crumble, not because of my mistakes, but because of theirs. And if you think I had a support system, I think again. My mother made sure the church knew I was ungrateful and unstable. My father stopped returning my calls. Emily posted cryptic messages online about betrayal within the family. Even my extended family, aunts and uncles I'd once trusted, fell silent. But it was during this storm that I discovered something that changed everything. I was combing through months of bank statements, trying to piece together how deep the hole really was, when I noticed something odd: 2 loan applications signed in my name, with signatures that didn't even look like mine. I dug deeper, cross-checking documents, and found emails between my mother and the bank manager discussing how to best keep Olivia out of the loop. It hit me all at once. This wasn't just a series of bad decisions. This was coordinated. This was deliberate. And for the first time in my life, I stopped feeling guilty and started feeling angry. But I didn't explode. I didn't confront them in a blaze of fury. Instead, I began to build my own case. I copied every suspicious email, downloaded every document, took screenshots of every shady text. I started a new folder on my desktop: evidence. Because the truth is, sometimes you can't outshout your enemies, but you can outdocument them. And as a lawyer, I knew the best revenge is quiet, thorough, and absolutely undeniable. Next came the strategy. I called Sarah, my best friend and colleague, and told her everything. We spent hours over coffee, mapping out every transaction, every forgery, every lie. We contacted the bank, and I requested a formal investigation into financial abuse and identity theft. I reached out to a forensic accountant to verify the fake signatures. And the whole time, my family had no idea. To them, I was still the quiet, reliable Olivia. To me, I was finally taking my power back. But that power came at a price. My family's world was about to fall apart, and for the first time, I wasn't going to be the one to save them. I'll tell you how it happened. But first, let me show you what it means to have real allies, and what happens when you bring the truth into the light. The thing about documenting your pain is that, eventually, it becomes your shield. While my family was busy spinning stories and posting curated pictures online, I was quietly assembling an arsenal of proof: months of screenshots, every bank statement, every transfer, every message where someone said just this once: "Live. I promise." Sarah, my best friend and the one person I trusted completely, was my anchor. She sat with me night after night as we color-coded spreadsheets and organized emails. She read every line, spotted patterns I'd missed, and reminded me again and again that I wasn't crazy. "You know this is criminal, right?" she said, tapping a finger on the forgery. "It's not just family drama anymore." I knew she was right. But it was hard to think of my own parents and sister as perpetrators. For so long, I had believed the narrative that I was too sensitive, that I overreacted, that a real daughter would sacrifice without complaint. But when you see your own signature forged on a loan for $60,000, reality has a way of snapping into focus. One rainy Thursday, we took everything to the bank. I requested a meeting with the branch manager, who turned out to be Mr. Stevens, a longtime friend of my father, someone who'd watched me grow up. I expected him to defend my family. This is identity theft. I'll have to escalate this to the fraud division and possibly to law enforcement. Hearing those words, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. This was really happening. The quiet revenge I'd built piece by piece was about to become very public. Sarah helped me consult with a forensic document analyst, who confirmed that the signatures weren't mine. We compiled a complete timeline, mapped every transfer, and compared every payment I'd made more than $200,000 over 8 years, all while being systematically erased from my own family's life. With Sarah's legal expertise backing me, we prepared a formal complaint for the bank's fraud investigation unit, attached with a letter of representation from our law firm. The next step was harder, letting my family know I was no longer playing along. I sent a brief, carefully worded email to my parents and Emily. I have reviewed my financial involvement with the family and discovered several unauthorized transactions and forgeries. I have submitted all evidence to the appropriate legal and financial authorities. Further communication regarding these matters will be handled by my attorney. I expected fury, or perhaps desperate apologies. What I got instead was an onslaught of manipulative messages, my mother accusing me of destroying the family, Emily raging that I was ruining her life, my father leaving angry voicemails about how I owed them everything after all they'd done for me. But none of it moved me. For the first time, their voices were background noise. The evidence spoke for itself. And I had Sarah at my side, unwavering. The bank opened a formal fraud investigation. The threat of criminal charges loomed for my family. Our church community started whispering, Mr. Stevens, in his quiet, respectable way, made sure the right people knew what had really happened. If you've never watched a family implode from the inside, let me tell you, it's not dramatic at first. It's quiet, cold, and strangely peaceful. I didn't gloat. I didn't shout. I simply waited as the truth moved, like slow poison, through every room of the house I'd once called home. But the story wasn't over yet. The final confrontation was coming, and I was ready to face it with the same calm, deliberate focus I'd brought to every case in court. Except this time, the case was my own life. What happened at that meeting would change everything. Not just for me, but for everyone who ever thought they could use family as a shield for betrayal. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a chill in the air and tension running through every message on my phone. My mother insisted on a family meeting to clear the air. Olivia. For Emily's sake, if nothing else. But I knew better. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about control. About dragging me back into line. Sarah came with me. She wore her lawyer's suit, calm and unflinching, holding a folder stuffed with evidence. We met at the law office of a mutual acquaintance, neutral ground, with polished wood and glass walls that let the morning light pour in but offered no real warmth. My parents and Emily were already waiting, faces tight, eyes défiant. The moment I walked in, Emily began. So, are you here to apologize, or just to cause more drama? My mother's lips were thin with anger. Olivia, you have no idea the damage you've done. This family is falling apart. Your father hasn't slept in days. Emily's business opportunities are gone because of your... My father, always silent in a crisis, just stared at the table. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. I took a deep breath. I had spent my entire life bracing for moments like this. always hoping I could say the right thing to earn love. Or at least acceptance. But this time, I didn't come for approval. I came for the truth. I'm not here to apologize, I said, my voice steady. I'm here to present facts. I opened the folder and slid copies of the forged loan documents across the table. I laid out the printouts of every transfer, every payment, every email thread. Sarah added a notarized statement from the forensic analyst, confirming the forgeries. Mr. Stevens, the bank manager, joined the meeting by video call, his presence alone making my parents shift in their seats. This is what I have submitted to the fraud division, I continued. And this, I tapped the stack, is what I am prepared to present in civil court if necessary. Emily scoffed, folding her arms. You're doing all this over money after everything we did for you. Sarah answered before I could. Identity theft and fraud are federal crimes. Emily, it's not about money. It's about the law. For a long moment, no one spoke. My mother's hands trembled. My father's jaw was clenched so tight I thought he might break a tooth. Emily's face twisted with disbelief. Then with fear. Then my mother found her voice, her tone sliding into wounded victimhood. I can't believe you would do this to us, Olivia. After all the sacrifices we made for you. After all the opportunities you had because of this family. I didn't flinch. All I ever wanted was respect. And for my boundaries to matter. I asked for honesty. I got forgery and betrayal. Mr. Stevens cleared his throat on the video call. Based on the evidence provided, the bank is moving forward with a formal fraud investigation. The accounts in question will be frozen pending review. We are required by law to notify the authorities. It was done. The air in the room shifted. For the first time in my life, I watched as the power dynamic flipped. My family, who had always relied on my silence, faced the consequences of their own actions, public, documented, and irreversible. Emily's defiance cracked, and she started to cry. You can't do this. You're my sister. My mother wept. My father just looked at me, lost and hollow. But I didn't break. I stood my ground, quiet, steady, letting the weight of evidence do what years of pleading never could. Sarah put a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she whispered. As I left the meeting, I felt something unfamiliar, relief. The battle was over. But I knew the war wasn't finished yet, not with reputations, careers, and a family legacy about to unravel in the public eye. What happened next would echo through every part of my family's life. And this time, I wouldn't be the one picking up the pieces. If you've ever watched a house of cards tumble, you know it happens faster than you think. The aftermath of that meeting spread like wildfire, starting with a handful of frozen accounts and ending with a storm that swept through every part of my family's carefully constructed image. It began at the bank. The fraud division froze the mortgage and the accounts tied to my name. The investigation moved quickly once Mr. Stevens confirmed the forged signatures and unauthorized loans. Law enforcement was notified. My mother and Emily were called in for questioning. My father's role as a consultant at his former firm was quietly suspended. Word leaked out to their church. The tight-knit Connecticut community that once whispered about my coldness now buzzed with new gossip. Emily tried to fight back online. She posted stories and photos on Instagram, painting herself as the wounded victim and me as the heartless career woman obsessed with money. But screenshots of the legal documents soon surfaced courtesy of some mutual friends who knew the truth. Emily's sponsorships evaporated almost overnight. The boutique she'd tried to relaunch was dropped by suppliers. She received a formal warning for fraud from a business association. Every time she deleted a comment, two more appeared, each one tagging me, asking for Olivia's side of the story. My mother was stripped of her leadership role at church. The very people she confided in now avoided her, whispering about financial abuse and police involvement. My father stopped attending community events, shrinking further into himself. Then came the legal consequences. The authorities required full restitution of the stolen funds, more than $200,000. Every cent tracked and accounted for. The court barred Emily from taking any business loans or lines of credit for the next decade. My mother's name appeared in the local paper, tied to charges of fraud and financial abuse. Their lawyer, the same one who had tried to intimidate me, resigned after seeing the mountain of evidence. And I moved into the home I'd finally been able to buy in my own name, with money I'd earned and protected. For the first time, I slept without dread. I donated a portion of the settlement to start the Family Justice Fund, a nonprofit helping others escape financial abuse. Sarah and I became even closer. She helped me find a therapist who specialized in family trauma. You might think I felt triumphant. In reality, what I felt most was peace, a silence that wasn't empty, but free. I finally understood that protecting yourself from your family is not betrayal. Sometimes, it's survival. Just as I started settling into this new life, one final twist arrived, a text message from Emily. I'll tell you what she said in a moment. But first, let me reflect on what it cost and what I learned along the way. Emily's message arrived late one evening as I sat by my apartment window, the city lights twinkling against the glass. The message was short, surprisingly honest for her. I'm sorry, Liv. I know I took advantage of you. I was jealous. I thought you had everything together. But I never understood what you were carrying for all of us. I know it's too late. But I hope you can be happy. I'm trying to figure things out now. Emily. I read it twice. My heart heavy, not with regret, but with a strange, bittersweet relief. For years, I'd wished for some grand apology, some confession that would undo the damage. But sitting there, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need forgiveness from the people who hurt me to reclaim my own peace. So I didn't reply. Instead, I let the silence speak for me, the first true boundary I'd ever set with my family. I deleted the message and turned off my phone. I was free in a way I'd never been before. I wish I could say that the pain vanished with the final verdict or that healing happens overnight. The truth is, family betrayal leaves scars, even when justice is served. But I can tell you this: every sleepless night, every dollar lost, every moment of doubt led to this moment where I chose myself, not out of spite, but out of necessity. If you're listening to this and you've ever been told that your worth is measured by your sacrifice, I want you to hear me now. You do not owe your silence to anyone, especially not to those who mistake your kindness for weakness. Family is supposed to lift you up, not hold you down. Since then, life has been quiet, and I'm learning to love the quiet. I've kept working, building my career, and growing the Family Justice Fund. I've surrounded myself with people who show up for me because they care, not because they expect something in return. I still have bad days, but I know where to turn. Most importantly, I know who I am, with or without their approval. I'll end with this. What would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven? Or would you have walked away for good? Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Someone you called family? If you have, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. Let someone else know they're not crazy for setting boundaries, not selfish for saying enough. And if you found any strength in mine, hit subscribe and stick around for more stories of justice, survival, and quiet revenge. Thank you for listening. This is Olivia Bennett. Finally free.